All right, so if you could just start by introducing yourself and kind of explaining a bit more about your story with speedrunning.
Sure. My name is James. I go by JSR on Twitch. I just hit my 8-year stream anniversary last month. So I've been doing this for 8 years. And I've been a dog owner for going on 4 years of that time, which is crazy to think about because I still remember getting him like it was yesterday. And I'm a speedrunner. Amongst other things, I do retro variety. I play randomizers. I race. I do challenge runs, like I'm currently doing a GoldenEye 00 Agent Permadeath challenge run, where I have to get through the entire game on the hardest difficulty without a single death or fail or have to start over. And I've made it all the way to the end, but I haven't quite finished yet. But I enjoy playing games in abstract ways. I enjoy taking a game that is intended to just beaten, for fun. That's what people play video games for. And I do enjoy playing games casually, but when there's a challenge ahead of me, a difficult way to play a game that I know I can accomplish, that's what really gets my gears going. And I just enjoy speedrunning for that reason, because it's taking a game that is intended to be played in a very specific way. Usually, not every game's like that, but with speedrunning, it's kind of like taking this game and trying to figure out not just, go as fast as you can, but what options are available to you in order to go faster. Sometimes it's as simple as just be good at the game. But a lot of games in speedrunning have glitches, tricks, strategies, we call them strats, and other things that come up which change the dynamic. There might be a frame perfect trick that you have to execute multiple times to save fractions of a second, but it adds up over a run. There might be a trick that if you fail it, the run's over, and you have to start all the way over. Every speedrun is its own little puzzle to figure out. And even if it's a dog playing a game or something as straightforward as like Super Mario Bros., which trust me is not straightforward, but that's not the point. It doesn't matter what the speedrun is. Your job as a speedrunner is to figure out what you're capable of doing, figure out how best to approach that strategy, that predetermined pathway that you want to go from A to B as fast as possible, and then you have to do it. And there's this, it's a completely original way to enjoy a retro game, especially a game if you've played it a bunch, if you've beaten it so many times that you no longer find enjoyment in playing it. Well, that's what's cool about speedrunning, is you can attack a game you've played to death, and you can play it in a way which will never, ever get old. And that breathes new life into these games, allows me to play games like Zelda on NES, or Chrono Trigger, or GoldenEye, or whatever. Games I've played so much that I'm no longer enjoying them casually. Suddenly, it's like they have new life. Randomizers are great with that, by the way. So that's, I think, what makes me enjoy speedrunning. It's the challenge of it. It's the fact that it gives you a whole fresh new way to play games, and it gives you the opportunity to play games in different ways, like low percent, for example, dog percent. I mean, these are ways that the developers never thought the games would be played. And as a speedrunner, your job is to figure out how to beat it under these rules as fast as possible. And I think that's what is so great about speedrunning.
Yeah, I mean, a big way that I always hear about speedrunning, just from my point of view, someone who has never done something like this before, is it always seems like get the game done as fast as you can, as quickly as possible. Is that how you would describe speedrunning, or does it go deeper than that?
You can. It depends really on the game and what your goal is. I mean, if you're trying to beat, say, Ninja Gaiden on the Nintendo as fast as possible, or Super Mario 64, or even something modern like an Elden Ring or a Tears of the Kingdom, each of those games have different strategies that you can apply to the run in order to save time. Sometimes it's a massive time save. Sometimes it's just a small one. So as a speedrunner, your job is to figure out what you're comfortable going for, figuring out how to best practice this so that you can nail it. Because a lot of these tricks are literally 1/60th of a second that you have to hit the button. And if you're like doing a speed run and you're in the middle of a run and you come to that point in the run where you have to nail that trick, you get one shot at it to get a record, to get a PB, whatever it is. And if you fail it, you have to start all the way over. So or you'll lose a bunch of time and you'll not PB. So it's like you have to pick your battles, right? You have to figure out what you're comfortable going for. Once you know what you're comfortable going for, you have to figure out how to practice it, get good enough to execute it, then you have to execute it. So for each speedrunner, that's different. I mean, if you're going for the world record in Ninja Gaiden, you have to fight Jackio middle platform with the crazy mash. You have to learn how to slash cancel. You have to go for quick climbs. You have to nail your Nimpo route. You have to get all the quick kills on the bosses, etc. There's so many little things that if you're just starting out, there's no reason to go for those. When you get to that point, you have to make that determination. Oh, I want this record, or I want this goal time, or I want the best time available that I could possibly hit. And every speedrunner being a different individual, it changes depending on what you want, what you're capable of, how much time you have to work on it, and then whether or not you're willing to go for it. And those 4 factors make it a unique experience for every single person who's ever speedrun a game. And that's what makes it so exciting. Everybody approaches a game in a different way that may or may not be the way you would do it or I would do it. And that's what makes it exciting. How is this individual going to reach the plateau I reached, or this plateau I've seen other people reach? For me, that's what makes it so exciting, and I'm not even talking about like PB or even myself, like as a Zelda runner, I'm currently 6th in the world in The Legend of Zelda. And been in the top 5. I've never had the record, but I've been close. But when I watch runners coming up in that game now, newer runners who are attacking the game and trying to get to the same spots on the leaderboard that I am and the other runners are, you see them coming up and they may or may not apply the same strategies I use or that other runners use. And that's what makes it so exciting to watch, because you don't know how they're going to get there.
That is a big element of speedrunning that I'm curious to talk to you more about, is the idea of, like, as a viewer watching these speedruns, there are techniques and strats, as you've mentioned, that I would never think of. And even the idea of how little did you say it was? Like a 1/160th of a second?
Yeah.
Like that quick of reaction time is absolutely insane to think about. And I wasn't even aware that you were like that high with The Legend of Zelda. I mean, the idea of taking all of these strats and trying to apply them to multiple games, do you learn speedrunning strategies for only certain types of games, or do you find that these strats can apply to different games in kind of a different way from each other?
Well, I'll answer the second part of that first. I do believe that as a speedrunner improves and gets more experience, either in one speed game or many. And because every runner is different, right? Some runners will pick one game and they'll hyper focus on that game and they'll optimize that game and they will go for every single time save. And eventually they get good enough and they get enough experience that those 1/60th inputs, as difficult as they are, they've done them so many times that it's almost muscle memory, if not just automatic. For a lot of people, like in Mario, they go for bullet bill glitch, they go for flagpole glitch, they go for pipe jumps and clips. Things that if you and I sat down and tried to execute them, it would take us hours. But they can nail it right now because they've done it hundreds, if not thousands of times. Screen scrolls in Zelda are a good example of that. A screen scroll in Zelda 1 allows you to go from this side of the screen to this side of the screen by going that way. And so it's a double pixel perfect 1-frame input. You have to nail a pixel, then you have to do a 1-frame input. I'm sorry, I said it was a double pixel perfect input. It's a pixel perfect 1-frame input, where you have to land on a pixel, then do a 1-frame tap, and then you can go. And in a top tier run, you don't have time to like inch forward. You have to land on that pixel, then you have to nail that 1-frame tap. And for an average runner, that might be really difficult. But for me, I've done it literally tens of thousands of times in both vanilla and randos. So like for me, it's automatic at this point. I don't think about it at all. I just land on the pixel and do it. Those kind of strategies, going back to the question in the first part of it, when you pick up a speed run, you kind of want to figure out what you're comfortable going for. Again, going back to the second part, you have to have the experience to understand what you're good at. If you don't have that experience, then it is your responsibility to figure out what you're comfortable going for. You watch a speed run. You watch a tutorial video, you watch the world record, or if it's a game that's never been ran before, which as time goes on, those are fewer and far between. But when you have to route a game, you have to go for what there is as far as like what information's available to you. Sometimes you just watch a world record and take notes. But another game, for example, I was the first person to do a speed run of Ben 10 on the Hyperscan. The Mattel Hyperscan, if you've never heard of it, it's a stupid console. You scan cards. It's dumb. It's awful. But
no, it is.
I had to do a speed run of that for a project called the Angry Video Game Nerd Trials of JSR. I can come back to that if you want, but like those kind of speed runs it's like uncharted territory. You have to figure it out. And then a lot of the times that information isn't available to you. You have to look at like FAQs, walkthroughs, let's plays. You have to sit down with the game and just experiment. And that kind of goes back to what tricks do you want to do? What's worth going for? If it's a big trick that skips a big part of a game and is not very difficult to do, well then of course every runner should go for it. But if it's a double pixel perfect, frame perfect, difficult trick that involves a complex input, a new runner might not be able to do that. Not because they're not capable of it, but because a veteran runner understands how these inputs work, understands how clipping out of bounds works, or understands how to anticipate a frame perfect input so that they can nail it. Those kind of things combined with like input lag, your type of your controller, what type of monitor you're playing on. Are you on real hardware? Every single one of these factors plays into how a speed run goes. And it again really comes down to what an individual, if he or she thinks that they're capable of doing the input, then they should go for it. But each speedrun is its own little puzzle like that.
I've said it before, but the idea of how much thought needs to go into each run before you even start, of trying to figure out from strats that already exist to how you can make it even better. Things like this I think are incredible to hear about, is building upon what people already know and going further than that. Now, we have been talking a lot about like, NES games, SNES games, a lot of more retro games. What role do you think retro games play within speedrunning? Because they mainly seem to be those games versus like Doom Eternal or more modern day games.
It is kind of a polarizing thing, right? Because the folks who began speedrunning, speedrunning isn't a new phenomenon. And although I've only been doing it for 8 years, and a lot of people have just only heard of it in the last 5 or 6 years, speedrunning's been around since the late 90s, early 2000s with games like Doom, GoldenEye, Quake. GDQ actually came from a bunch of people that got together to play Quake. Speedrun.com came from a leaderboard that was derived from people who were in the forums at SDA, Speedrun Demos Archive, which originated from Quake. Like, those things have been around for decades, and those old school guys started with these, what were at the time modern games. I mean, I think the first leaderboard website was for Metroid Prime, which back then was a new game. But now it's 20 years old, and that community's been around for 20 years. So these people are now older. They've been running the game for decades. I think for newer runners that haven't been around to see those retro games evolve, those communities evolve, it's a little harder to connect with it. I don't think there's a divide between retro and modern. I play modern games. I still, to this day, do challenge runs and speed runs of modern games. Last year, I was able to do Tears of the Kingdom permadeath, where I had never played the game before, and I played through it blind. And if I died, I had to start over. Like, those kind of challenge runs and speed runs and things like that appeal to gamers that play retro games. And I think you're starting to see retro games appealing to younger people as well. A lot of Mario runners, for example, are in their 20s. Just at this same GDQ that PB performed at, Mario was ran by GT Ace, and I think GT Ace isn't even 30 yet, which is crazy to think about because Mario's about to be 40. So you think about why would somebody play a game that's that old, even though they're that young? It's the challenge and the thrill of a speedrun. It's the idea of picking up a game that wasn't designed to be beaten quickly and beating it quickly. Retro games, I feel like they are more in tune with what makes a speedrun fun. Not that modern games aren't. Modern games are great speedruns, and a lot of them are fantastic. I mean, going back to Tears of the Kingdom, Breath of the Wild, those are phenomenal speedruns that I think are great watches, especially if you watch the blindfolded runs, just FYI. But modern games are meant to be much more fulfilling experiences, especially when you start getting into like the PS2, GameCube era and beyond, because those games all were inspired by games like Ocarina of Time, Grand Theft Auto, Shenmue, big open world games, big epic experiences. And then of course there was the first person shooter phenomenon of that era as too. So you had this group of people who were speedrunning retro games that started seeing these new games come out, and they're like, and this is going to take me hours to route out and figure out. Obviously, there were people who were willing to do that. But the older stuff is simpler, it's more difficult, so it's a lot more impressive when somebody's able to beat it quickly. I think there's so many different factors like that that make retro games a very appealing speedrun option, even in comparison to modern games today. I think they're just a challenge that you see a lot of retro style indie platformers today looking like retro games. They want to capture that magic. But because there's not the same limitations, I feel like they are not quite the same experience, but they're close. I feel like they're better than a lot of like the bigger epic games, but that's just me.
No, definitely. I mean, there's some indie games that have more emotion in them than any of the AAAs out there. So yeah, I mean, it really feels like retro plays a big part. When before we get into that, I want to focus back on your history with speedrunning. The Angry Video Game Nerd, I have seen a couple of those videos, and especially the infamous Polybius, is that how you pronounce it? That a lot of those games seem like very challenging games. So for those who don't know, why don't you just quickly give like what was it like, because you spanned around over 200 games in the course of a couple of years? Was it 2, I believe?
It was about 5, but I did take some time off in between for some things. It wasn't 5 consecutive years. It took me about 2,500 hours of gameplay, from learning runs, routing runs, taking notes, practicing, and performing runs. About 2,500 hours cumulative. I tracked the whole thing. About 15,000 resets, and tons of just crazy experiences. I mean, the AVGN is notorious for playing bad games. When you watch an AVGN episode, you're likely going to see one of the worst games of all time. Not always. I mean, he played good games like Earthbound, Mario 3, Zelda 2, etc. But he played, some of the worst games ever made, like Hong Kong 97, or, for example, one of my more notorious moments in the trials was Wally Bear. Wally Bear in the No Gang is this awful unlicensed side-scroller for the Nintendo, where you're a bear on a skateboard who goes around telling people not to do drugs. And you can tell the budget was probably McDonald's lunch that day or something, because they did not put much effort into it. And it made me so angry that despite the game being worth, at the time, $70, it's worth way more than that now. It's like $200 now. But I didn't care. I was so angry. I just took it out of my console and chucked it across the room. But when I talk about the trials and those moments like that, those frustrating moments that caused me to lose my temper, I look back at it now. Like I said, I've been streaming 8 years, and the person I was when I first started streaming, when I first started speedrunning, I work in construction. That's what I've been doing for pretty much since I've been an adult. And that environment is very different than the environment you see on Twitch. You hear a lot more vulgarity, for example. You see people lose their temper over the dumbest things. Experiencing those 200 games and knowing that there was a goal that I had to attain, I was working way too hard. I mean, it was maybe a little sunk cost fallacy, you know what I'm saying? But I was very much aware that I was doing something dumb, but it was also a lot of fun. Despite the challenge, I knew I had to push. I couldn't give up. And knowing that inspires me a lot. I'm the type of person that when people tell me I can't do something, it makes me really, really, really want to do it. And so when I'm telling myself I can't do it and then I do it, that is an experience of like life-changing proportions. When you do that over and over again, over 200 games, you learn patience, you learn perseverance, you learn how to control your temper, and you learn that you can accomplish almost anything when you really push hard. Like teaching a dog to speedrun a game would have never happened had it not been for all those different downs and ups that I had in the trials. For every world record, there was a game like Polybius that literally made me go into my bedroom and cry while the timer was running and I was live on Twitch. There were games like Sword Quest that made me so angry I ripped it out of my console and destroyed it. But there's also moments where I got records and cried, or chat blew up because I made it over this hump that took me weeks to get over. Like games like Earthbound, Tomb Raider, but also games like Atari Warriors, one of the worst games ever made. When I did the trials, I had to do the no ABBA version, and unless you know the game, that context is too hard to explain. Like, it wouldn't make any sense, but that's very difficult to do. A lot of retro speedrunners and gamers are terrified of that game, and I was no different. But because I made that game number 200 intentionally, knowing that at that point I'd be inspired to push. Not only that, but learning all the lessons I learned through all those challenges and all those frustrations made it almost fun. You get to a point where you start looking at bad games not as suffering, even when you are suffering, but rather you kind of just take it with a grain of salt. You understand what you're getting into and you just do it. You don't make excuses. You don't complain. You just understand what you're doing. You just kind of say, oh, I knew what this was going into it, right? So why am I going to sit here and doubt myself or complain or, waste time when I could just do it? It's not impossible. People have done it before. So just do it. And as you keep doing that over and over the course of those 200 games, you just start building so much confidence. One of the games was based on an episode of the Angry Video Game Nerd about Rob the Robot. And when I was doing the Rob the Robot episode, that's when I had the idea of giving a controller to my dog. And it was just a fun little idea I had. Nothing was ever going to come out of it. And then I had a buddy of mine in my community kind of talk to me, like say, hey, man, I got this GameCube fight stick. We could just create him a controller and you could train him to push the button down. And that led into the whole PB saga. But that idea, that inspiration would never have come had it not been for everything that I had gone through in those trials. Every one of those resets and those games, you have to learn a new game, right? And then you perform that speed run. And then what? You don't want to keep... I'm not going to run the Drunken... or Master Chu and the Drunker Who, or whatever that game's called on the NES. I don't even remember anymore. I mean, I'm not going to run that for more than a couple of days. And then I got another game to move on to. So it is a little bit frustrating when you're learning that many games that quickly because you don't really get to spend time with a lot of them like you want to. But that also, to me, proved what I really enjoy about speedrunning, which is not so much the actual execution of the run, but it's the figuring out the puzzle part of it, figuring out how to do it. For me, that's the part of speedrunning that I enjoy the most, is the process of putting it all together so you can do it, which to me is like more important than actually doing it to yourself, knowing that you can do it. And then it's just whether or not you need that validation, that self-assurance that you go and do it, right? But everybody's different. Some people, they would have to push for the world record in all these games. I've seen numerous streamers, speedrunners over the course of my career take on challenges such as this. I won't say names, but nobody's finished any of them. One guy wanted to run every NES game. He got about 100 in and then gave up. One guy is trying to speedrun every NES game right now. I think he's about 200 games in, but he's kind of realized over the course of his project, because he's a very good speedrunner, he's realized this is hard. This is really hard. And that was kind of the same thing that happened to me. Is like there's this change when you realize what really drives you in speedrunning. Again, for some people, it's being on that leaderboard, being really high up there, getting a world record or getting top 5 or bopping somebody you don't like or whatever. For me, that's secondary. It didn't used to be. It used to be a competition. But for me now, meeting all these different communities, meeting all these different people, and seeing how wonderful speedrunning can be when you no longer approach it as a competition. Instead, you approach it as your own self-improvement, your own I don't want to say challenge, but I think that's the best way to look at it, is like telling yourself you can do it and then accomplishing that. It changes your outlook on a lot of things because it's hard. But man, has it changed my life for the better.
I absolutely love that, because there's, as much as the saying "just do it" has been memed upon in so many years, it is still one that is absolutely true. Of it, just like you've done, you've set yourself a challenge that many people would not have thought of ever doing, but then you took it a step further and actually completed it, which is absolutely incredible. So okay, we've waited long enough. we've dodged every other question. I think now it's time to start talking about the dog. So tell us a bit about PB. How did his story kind of come into play?
So Peanut Butter is a 4-year-old Shiba. He was born in July of 2020. In 2020, I got sent on furlough. You know, it was the lockdown and everyone was on quarantine. And so I was at home and I had nothing to do. I was just bored. I was streaming, but I had a lot more free time suddenly. So I was like, okay, I should get a dog. I've always wanted a dog, but I live in a little apartment. I don't have a yard. So I didn't want to get a bigger dog that would need that sort of space to be able to be happy. And so as I did research, I always been interested in the Shiba Inu breed, but they're expensive. They're a pain in the butt sometimes. And I wasn't really 100% sure I wanted one. But then as the pandemic was happening, I said to myself that I should research this. You know, if I want to get a dog, I need to get the one that I want the most, because I'm gonna have them for 10 to 20 years. You know, you gotta really make sure you don't want to do anything impulsive like that, right? So I did the research and I found all this stuff about Shibas, that they're aloof and stubborn and territorial and antisocial, and they're kind of mean, and they attach themselves to you and hate everybody else. They don't like getting pet. They don't like kids. They don't like babies. They don't like other dogs or cats. They're picky eaters. They're possessive. He's none of that. He can be aloof and he can be a little stubborn, and sometimes he doesn't want to get touched. But this dog is not like any other Shiba. I was not expecting Peanut Butter. When I bought the dog, and then I had to wait for the mother to have her litter. I was going to get a girl. And so I went to the breeder's business to get PB, and I sat in this playpen they brought out the girl dog. And they put her in the pen with me, and she was adorable. She was small, tiny little cute thing, but she was terrified. She peed all over the place. She wouldn't engage with me. She wouldn't play with me. She was scared. That didn't bother me, but it did impact me a little bit. I was like, okay, well, let me see the boy. You know, let me just see the boy, because I was looking for a certain type of personality. And they brought out Peanut Butter, and he was just the most lively and happy and playful dog. Had this temperament about him that I've never seen in any other dog. Not just a Shiba, but like any dog. He was special and I knew it. So I bought him. And we had all the time to train. I didn't necessarily intend to train him to play video games or anything like that. Like, although I did name him PB, and that was intentional. As a speedrunner, you know, when we do the best we've ever done, we call that a personal best, a PB. I didn't want to name him personal best, so I named him Peanut Butter, but it worked perfectly because now I can have the best PB every single day. That's kind of, I know it's cheesy, but that's why I named him that. So anyways, we we wanted to train him, meaning me and my buddy Chris, who helped me train him. I mean, not initially, but he eventually started helping training, and he's been a huge help. But I started with just basic obedience training, right? And he picked up on it so quick. Like, within the first month I had him, he got all of his basic obedience training down. Sit, stay, leave it, come, lay down, go to your bed. You know, he knew potty training. By the end of the first couple months I had him, he was already off-leash trained, and he was already learning tricks. And at first I was like, okay, this is a really special dog. I'm going to teach him how to do agility training or something like that, you know? But I never got around to it, and then the gyromite thing happened. And when I tried it and he did it, I had this epiphany that like, this is a special dog. And regardless if it'll ever do anything like this or even more, whatever, you know, like I knew that this was something I had to at least try, at least give it a shot. And if I fail, it's no sweat off my back. It's a little bit of time and a controller. And then it blew up. Like, not at first. We completed our first run in July of 2023. I put it up on YouTube and nobody cared. It got like 100 views. Nobody tweeted about it. My stream didn't get any bump in viewers. In fact, my numbers were weaker when PB ran than they were when I played other games. And then it got into GDQ. And everything changed. And the video is up like 55,000 views now or something like that. And I'm glad I pursued it because PB has shown me time and again that not only is he a smart and patient dog, that's like the number one thing, by the way, about him that's special is that he's patient. I've never seen a dog like him that is just extremely eager to do what I ask of him just because he loves me. Just because he loves treats, just because he loves play, but mostly because he loves me. And he tries so hard for me. I'm just so happy that I went after this, and I'm just so lucky that I chose to do this with a dog like Peanut Butter because he's a one-of-a-kind dog. He's very special.
Talk about... I know you were saying, like, he's not aloof, but I have not seen him move this entire time in the background. It's absolutely adorable. So when it comes to PB's moments in speedrunning, what would you say is like a more difficult moment while teaching PB to speedrun? I mean, dogs aren't really trained to speedrun, but here we are.
Well, excuse me. I mean, it's not a secret that Peanut Butter's not reacting to the screen. He's reacting to me, and I'm the one reacting to the screen. So even though he is playing the game, he's not looking at the video and saying, I need to jump now. If I relied on him to do that, he would walk into a pit, die, and say, where's my treat? So there is a lot of it that is me. And for me, the biggest challenge has been to you have to keep your mood the right way, right? He feeds off my energy. So I have to make sure I'm in a good mood, a good mental space, and I feel good. But not only that, he has to be in a good mental space, in a good mood, well-rested, and hungry. Because he's very treat motivated. So if I try to train him or play with him or he does a run when he's not hungry, he's not going to perform very well. He'll still perform for me, but he will not do as well. So I usually try to set up a run when I know he's going to be hungry, right around dinner time. When he wakes up from his afternoon nap, he's hungry, he's gone to the bathroom, and now he's ready to play. He's ready to engage with me, and I pull out those treats and a little bit of that kibble. That was the hardest part for me, was trying to find that sweet spot. Not just the training to be patient, because that was difficult too. And whenever people tell me, oh, I want to train my dog to do this, just like you did, I think there are other dogs out there that can do this, maybe even better than he can. But finding a dog that has the patience and the focus that he has, that's going to be the hard part. The other hard part is you're going to have to make those adjustments yourself to figure out your best regimen, what is even possible. Because some people are just too busy. You know, if you've got kids and a spouse and a job, and you're streaming on your own content on Twitch, where are you going to find the time to do that? I think with me, I got lucky because of the pandemic. If I had been working full time, I don't train this dog. to do all the things he learned. And I'm probably not talking to you right now.
Yeah, I mean, he absolutely, it's incredible just to hear of what he's done so far in the speedrunning community. I'm sure he's going to do a lot more in the future. But before we talk about the future, why don't we talk about the most recent event that he's been to at GDQ? The idea of ending this run with a home run of all times. Why don't you tell me a bit more about how that event went? I mean, it seemed like everybody loved both of you there.
We talked about it. Crispy, my buddy Crispy, who lives just a few streets over, I've known him for a long time, even before I was on Twitch. He's been really instrumental in helping me train PB because I need the assistance of somebody to help with treats, to help get his focus back if he gets distracted. He was clutch during that run. A reason I mentioned him is we talked about it many times leading up to SGDQ about how we wanted the best case scenario, because when you're doing a GDQ run, in my opinion, the most important thing to remember is that you're showcasing not only your run, but yourself as a streamer, and you're trying to do it to raise money for a charity. So even though GDQ is a speedrunning event, it's not about what you do on the stage. The community of the speed game, they care. Oh man, you're doing Mario, you want to nail all the tricks and get as best a time as you can, but you also have to remember the Mario community is only going to be a fraction of a percentage of the viewers watching this event. So you have to put on a good show. You have to put on a good show. And what better show is there than a dog, right? But that was just what we went into it with this, knowing that the spectacle of this was going to be a must-see thing. And everybody was talking about it even before the run. We had no clue that this was going to happen. I mean, honestly, I didn't even know if he was going to win the game, because his lifetime record after GDQ is now 5 wins and 11 losses. So he's not the best team in the league. You know what I mean? Like he's had a low success rate because it took a long time for us to get to that point where he could even win a game. So he was like 1-7. But ever since we started working towards GDQ, he got better. We worked together. We got better. I went into the run with relative confidence, but no clue it was going to be a nail biter. When he went down 1-0, I was like, oh, here it goes. Because we've had games where he's gotten absolutely shelled because it's not necessarily his fault. That game has a lot of randomness. Speedrunners refer to it as RNG in the game, the random number generator that generates the random events that occurs, which is out of our power in a lot of cases, and this is no exception. If PB throws a strike fastball right down the middle, it could be hit for a little dribbler to the pitcher, or it could be a home run, and there's nothing he can do about it. So there is a little bit of fear, but also you understand, you're going into this, there's some things out of your control that you can't do anything about. You have to let those roll off your back and just control what you can control. And not only is that our timing with swinging, but that's him being prepared, having gone to the bathroom, having hit a little bit of a hungry tummy, giving him the good treats that make him really excited to perform. When you put all those things together, the run goes as well as it can go. To me, I would have been happy with just winning. I wouldn't have cared if it was 1-0 or 11-0 or 8-9. I mean, whatever the case is. My only real 2 goals of that run were to get under estimate and to win the game. And we had some technical difficulties during the run, like the capture dropped and they had to fix it. There was a spot where I was talking to the couch commentary team, who did a phenomenal job, by the way. They wanted me to sit in a chair, and then they were like, you got to move over here. Right before the run started, I told GDQ staff, I was like, we have to keep everything around PB distraction free. Because even though he is a very good dog and he's very talented, he might still get distracted if he sees people walking behind him, or if, something's going on, he might lose focus on me. And 15 seconds before we went live, somebody fell into the stage shin first into the corner of the stage so hard it shook the stage. And so if you watch the run back now, you'll see the first couple innings, you'll notice PB's really nervous. He keeps turning his head like this. It's because that happened literally right before we started. So there were a lot of things against us and a lot of randomness that involved itself in this run. So when PB had the opportunity to win the game, I knew that this was a thing that could happen. But if you had told me this was going to happen, I would have told you to take your Hollywood script to someone else because I don't believe that was going to happen. And I'm still kind of in shock. Like, literal Hollywood ending. I couldn't have written it any better. The back and forth with the score, how there were a couple things that happened to PB that were my fault. There were a couple things that happened to him that were his fault. And the computer was being generous enough that we had a chance to win. So, you know, you go into that situation understanding that it's an unlikely scenario to even find yourself in the first place. And then you're in that scenario and Griffey comes up and all I'm thinking is like, there's no way this could happen. I just need a base hit. I even say that in the run. I'm like, I just need a base hit. We can win the game. And then PB hits the home run. I don't remember anything after that for like a good minute. It's a blur. I mean, the reaction you saw of me in the crowd was genuine because none of us knew what was going to happen. So it was very much like watching a real baseball game in that regard. Like, you don't know the result. It's not like a speed run, normal speed run, where if you kill the boss, you win. You know that's going to happen. So if you kill the boss, you win. GG. In his case, he can do the speed run correctly and still lose. So, yeah, it's a scenario where all those things came together in like a magical moment that you probably never replicate again. And I'm just kind of it's still sinking in, like how cool that moment was, and just like, you know, like it's a moment that I'm gonna remember till the day I die, and a moment that, honest to God, is probably my most proud moment of my entire life. I mean, I know some people who don't play video games might not see that, but this little dog did something that's never been done before, raised over $35,000 for Doctors Without Borders, and he did so playing a 30-year-old baseball game. I don't give a damn who you are, but I'm proud of that. And if anyone isn't impressed or doesn't think that's cool, I don't know what to tell you. Because, I mean, you must be fun at parties. You must be really hard to impress because, like, I don't know, man. It's not lost on me how cool this is. And it's still kind of mind-blowing to me that I had a part in that, you know? Like, it doesn't feel real. It does not feel real yet.
I've been to like very few. I'm not a sports person in the slightest, but at the very end when it starts flying, it was the only time I think I've ever watched a baseball game go like, "Come on, keep going!" It was absolutely incredible to see. So that was great. And your idea of a Hollywood ending, I think goes into my next part of what is next for you and PB in the speedrunning world. Could we see a Hollywood movie in the future, do you think?
I mean, I would love to reenact that, but I can't promise I'm ever going to be able to top that. I mean, how do you top that? How do you top that? I mean, he did something. That game's never been in a Games Done Quick before. He's never done those speedrun in person before. I mean, he did do Gyromite, but that was remote. And he did that all for a charity, right? Like, it's a situation where you kind of don't know if you can top it. But we built him a custom controller, Chris and I, and with the help of a few people in my community. We built this new custom controller. Cost us about $1,500. It's made out of walnut. Got the Xbox wireless controller as the brain of the entire thing. Really cool controller, by the way. It's built for folks with disabilities to help with accessibility. And it allows us to use 3.5 millimeter jacks we can wire to arcade buttons. What this allows us to do is to repurpose the controller depending on the game we're playing. So if we're playing a game with complex inputs or a game that's much more difficult, we can set it up to fit that game in the best way that PB can do. We built this controller in preparation for SGDQ, not because he needed it for Griffey, though it did help with Griffey, more because we wanted to see what was that next step. Where do we go from here? And obviously it's going to be hard to top a walk-off home run at SGDQ, but whatever the case might be, I definitely know that I'm not done with working with him. I do want to have him at another GDQ in the future, or possibly other events if somebody calls. Maybe not even speedrunning stuff. I mean, I'm just saying, Oprah. I'm just saying. Yeah, I'll put. No, I don't know. I'm just kidding. But I mean, I'm not kidding though. Like, he could do stuff like that, and folks would probably eat it up. I mean, who doesn't love dogs, right? I don't know. All I know is whatever comes next, it's going to be a blast, and we're going to try some harder games. We're going to try some different things, and hopefully you'll see more of Peanut Butter very soon.
That'll be great. I can't wait in the future. I'm just going to be like, I interviewed him first before Oprah. Take that. Now I want a free car. So
Yeah.
it's incredible still just to hear. So, okay, from someone who personally, I've never done any speedrunning personally. However, in the future, I do plan on doing just one quick run, trying to figure out, after doing some more research, how do you speedrun? What are some strats? What are some skills? From your perspective, though, and I guess PB as well, where should someone start if they're interested in speedrunning, but they don't really know? Like, maybe what game, or should they focus on a game that they enjoy already?
That's a very difficult question to give a blanket answer for, but I have my own take on it. And I feel as if, again, every person's different, right? I mean, everybody learns differently, learns at different speeds. And so I think the safest way to give advice to new runners is set realistic expectations. Some people want record. If you want record, you have to understand that what you're about to go for, somebody has already poured thousands of hours of practice and reps into that. Understand what you're going to attempt before you attempt it, because I don't care who you are, it's not going to be easy. So understand that first. If your expectations are lower, you're just trying to complete a run and get on a leaderboard, that makes it a little bit easier, because step 2 is to pick a game, right? And that's the part people get hung up on. I think it's a little easier when you're first starting out, because I have 2 suggestions for you or anyone else who wants to learn a game. Pick a game you know very, very well that you no longer enjoy casually. For me, my first speedrun was Zelda 1 on NES, because I'd beaten that game like 50 times. I knew where everything was. It wasn't fun for me anymore. And I didn't play it anymore until I started speedrunning, and that breathed new life into it for me. That was a situation where I had a game that was already kind of over the hill for me. I say that in particular because if you pick a game you love and then you play it for thousands of hours and get angry at it all the time, you're going to hate it. But if you take a game you're burned out on and you put that same amount of time into it, it's going to come easier to you because you know it better. And now you've got a whole new approach to go with. Suddenly that game's fun for you again. If you can't think of a game like that, then my best advice would be to pick a game that you've never played before, or a game you have no interest in playing, or a game you probably wouldn't play otherwise, because those are the kind of things that are going to allow you to experiment. There's no risk. I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You never play it again. Who cares? So it just really depends on what you're willing to do as far as your goal. And then if there's a game that sticks out to you that you know you've played to death, well, then why not go for it? And that goes to step 3, and that is to figure out what you want to accomplish with that game. What category do you want to run? And that's usually a personal choice. Some people like completion, being a completionist. Some people want to beat it as quick as possible. Some people like the randomizers or challenge runs or whatever. You have to figure out what you want to do first, because each rule set's different. Each route is different. Each approach is different. Then once you figure that out, now you have to route and practice. And that, to me, is my favorite part. You'll take a game and say, I want to run Super Metroid, and then you have to figure out the route you want to run, and then you got to watch a run, take notes, watch a tutorial, take notes, learn the game, and depending on what you do, that could take a long time. So, again, understanding what you're getting into. Sometimes it's easier to pick a game that's a little shorter, a little simpler, just to dip your toe into the proverbial water and see whether or not you even like it. Because a game like Super Metroid might take you 400 hours to get good at, whereas a game like, I don't know, Earthworm. Actually, Earthworm Jim's a bad example. I'm trying to think of a Super Nintendo game to compare it to. Let's go with like, I don't know, Ren and Stimpy. That game is going to be a lot less of a time sink for you to get to the point where you'll be competitive. And so you have to pick a game that you like, a game you're willing to put in the work on without getting burned out on it. Figure out what you want to play, and then you just got to do it. And I would tell a new runner not to set their expectations too high initially. Get your toes wet first. You learn to swim before you go out into the ocean and start surfing. If that's your goal is to start surfing, you have to take those steps to get there. You can't just go out in the ocean, you're going to drown, right? You don't want to drown. That's why people get burned out on speedrunning. They push too hard. They challenge themselves to do things, and then they hold themselves to this standard that is impossibly high, and they get burned out on it and they quit. You can't do that. You've got to find your balance. You got to find what works for you, your effort that you're willing to put in, your schedule, and what you're good at. Like, it really is different depending on who you are. So start small and then evolve it from there. And you may end up finding a new hobby that you absolutely adore.
Nice. Yeah, it seems like speedrunning has a very open introductory level. Like, unless you're going for the top of the leaderboard, which, again, very unrealistic. But it seems like you can really just jump in and do an any percent or a completionist route if you want. Are there any misconceptions, though, about speedrunning that you think people should be made aware of, either as someone who views speedruns or someone who actually does them?
Well, there's a ton. So there's a lot of controversial takes about the type of person that speedruns. There's a lot of people who tend to click up into different friend groups and types of folks. And that's not a speedrunning quirk necessarily. You see that in every walk of life, right? But I think there's a lot of people who think that's like a speedrunning trait. There's a lot of things like that. You'll see it all over like websites like Reddit and 4chan and like, it's like, no, bro, that's just part of speedrunning, just like that's part of all walks of life. There are some phenomenal people in speedrunning who are community driven. They are helpful. They want to help new runners and veteran speedrunners. I can't speak for them all, but for myself, I genuinely find pleasure in helping a new runner to learn a game I know, because it's not only passing my knowledge on to somebody so that they can play a game, but you're giving back a little bit. When you start, you are a fish out of water. I mean, I didn't know what I was doing in Zelda. My first run, so I just picked up the game and started playing. I had no idea what I was doing. And as the Zelda community started to learn who I was, they were starting to give me advice. They gave me video tutorials. They helped me. And thanks to a lot of people, I got good quicker than I probably ever would have or should have. So I find my own self-obligation to help new runners whenever I can. As long as it's not going to be a massive burden to me. I'll make an hour-long tutorial video for somebody. I'll sit down and critique your run. I will help you when you're struggling with a trick, because people help me, and I want to pass that mentality on to anybody that will listen, because speedrunning changed my life. It changed who I am as a man. It changed who I am as a human. My compassion levels. I've learned a lot, not just about myself, but of just being an empathetic human. You know what I mean? Like, the community is very diverse and worldwide, and you get exposed to folks that you may not get exposed to in your daily lives outside. Like I said, I work construction. You know, I don't have a lot of exposure in different marginalized communities, different groups of people that are not only accepted but thrive in online spaces because they're much safer than a construction site or something like that. They find much more acceptance because you're exposed to that. So you're either going to be exposed as a crappy human being, or you have to find that acceptance, find that empathy, and realize that you can be a part of something really great. And speedrunning is something really great. It is a not just a way to challenge a game, but there's this community behind it that is helpful, friendly, excited when you win. Like I played baseball my entire life until I no longer was allowed to play. You get to that point and you play your last baseball game, yeah. But in sports, that locker room mentality, it's not like that. You compete for jobs, you compete to be in the starting lineup, and you want to stomp the other team. And in speedrunning, when somebody that I see coming up beats my time on a leaderboard, I don't get sad. Like, people will say, oh, what a shame, you got bopped. No, it's not a shame at all. I'm super happy for that person. That's kind of what I was saying earlier about leaderboards. I don't care that I'm 6th in the leaderboard on Zelda. You know what I care about when I run Zelda 1? I want to beat past me. I want to beat my time. That's all I care about. I don't care about any of the other people on that leaderboard. I want to do the best that I've ever done. That's what motivates me. And seeing the community do well and thrive, that's, again, just a testament to what speedrunning has allowed these spaces on Twitch, Discord, X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it, like all these other social media environments. It really is such a wonderful place to be. I've met some of the best people I know in the entire world because of this. And some of my best friends, some of the people I love and care about the most, are not just speedrunners, but people I would have not met had it not been for Twitch. So when you look at speedrunning, you look at, what these communities and what this hobby offers, if you give a little back, you'll find they'll give you more. It just adds up. Like, it's not hard to be a decent human being, but if you're a decent human being and you show a little compassion and you show that you're about the community, you're about everybody, and just being as open and just being a nice, decent person, they'll take care of you. They will absolutely lift you up. They will support you when you do something dumb like speedrunning 200 AVG endgames or teaching a dog to speedrun. Like, those are things that if I were a less savory individual, I probably wouldn't get that kind of support. So, again, that's just wonderful that Twitch has allowed and speedrunning has allowed me to be exposed to that kind of thing, because it really does change you as a person.
And I think that's a big reason I wanted to make this video focused around speedrunning is, like, gaming as a whole seems to be viewed still as, like, a very nerdy kind of thing. I mean, it's been more opened up in, recent years, but no, it still is that idea of, like, oh, well, there's toxic gamers, and that's what every single gamer is all of that nasty stuff, when really there's beautiful stories, such as whether it's you and PB or people within the speedrunning community that can make a big change, like you've been saying, which is fantastic. Well, right.
I mean,
this interview has gone on for
sorry.
No, you're good. A bit longer than I thought. But is there anything else you'd like to talk about with speedrunning that I haven't brought up yet, or?
I suppose, real quickly, I could just say that if you or anyone else out there wants to speedrun, don't tell yourself you can't do it. Have fun with it, and just challenge yourself a little bit. Take a small step forward and see how it feels. Everybody took their first steps. Everybody took their first swim. Everybody has done something for the first time that was scary and difficult. Speedrunning is difficult, but it shouldn't be scary. A lot of people say they're intimidated by it. There's no reason to be intimidated by it. What's the worst that could happen? You turn the game off, you walk away, you go back to your life. Have fun with video games, because that's what they're there for. Even in this type of competition or competitive medium, like, it's still there to have fun. If you're not having fun, then ask yourself why you're doing it. I mean, I'm not saying you have to be like having the time of your life when you're speedrunning, but there has to be some sort of reward in it for you. And for some people, that is the leaderboard. For some people, they want that world record. They want that first milestone. They want that name in the lights on Twitter for a day. But the thing is, if you find ways to have fun and enjoy the hobby, regardless of how you approach it, you're going to have that same fulfillment regardless if you get that world record or not. And that's going to make what should be a fun hobby into a fun hobby and not something that you're going to look back on with disdain or anything like that. Like, I know the interview is kind of getting long in the tooth, so I apologize, but I see it a lot with speedrunning where people will get burned out. They'll play the same game for 2 years straight. They'll get really good at it, and then they'll get tired and say, oh, I've achieved my goal, and they move on, and suddenly their viewer numbers on Twitch drop. And suddenly they're not the best in the world at a game anymore. Now they're new, right? They're playing a game for the first time. They're no longer the man. And a lot of runners will get kind of intimidated by that or kind of feel like they're messing up. And they'll go back to their old game. And now they're trapped in this loop where they're stuck playing the same game just so they can keep the same numbers on Twitch. And then they try it again. And same thing happens, you know? If you set your expectations correctly, you have fun with it, you will get so much out of this community. So it just depends on how you want to approach it. But that's how I would approach it, is just have fun. It's a game. Even when you're doing a speedrun, even if it's a dog playing, it's still just a video game. Enjoy it.
That's what they're made for anyway. By all means, no, I absolutely love hearing people's stories and what they like to talk about, so I just didn't want to take away from you. I'm like, all right, I don't mind how long this goes kind of idea.
You know,
but for people who do want to learn more about speedrunning, where are some places that they can find you, aka the shout out section of the interview?
Well, you can find me on Twitch, twitch.tv/JSR_. I stream 3 to 5 times a week, depends on my schedule, work, and all that kind of stuff. They can also join our Discord, which you can find in my chat with !Discord anytime, even when I'm not live. We hang out in there all the time. We do movie nights. We play video games together. We do voice chats where we just hang out and BS about the world and life. And you might even get exclusives from Peanut Butter over there. You never know. I'm on X. I'm on TikTok. I'm on a few other stuff like that. But you can also go to my website, thedoge-o.com. And that website has information on the trials. It has a press kit for PB, and it has all my social links.
And eventually you'll see him on the Oprah Winfrey Show, if that's still airing. All right, well,
If
yeah.
she calls, I'm answering.
Yeah. All right, well, JSR, PB, it's been an absolute pleasure to hear your story, and who knows, maybe this story will inspire someone else to try speedrunning on their own.
I would love to see more inspiration and more people taking on the hobby, because it is a really great hobby. And I definitely feel like teaching a dog is like just one way you can approach this kind of thing. To those out there who want to take on the challenge, I implore you to go for it. You know, what's the worst that could happen? You know, and enjoy yourself and have fun with it.
Simple as that. All right, well, thank you so much. It's been great.
No, thank you, man. This is a lot of fun.